My question is to the Premier. Last week's budget was her government's 9th straight deficit. They have more than doubled the debt. We have a larger debt than all other provinces combined. We have the largest subnational debt in the entire world, forcing their government.
Stop the clock, please. If you don't respond, it makes it easier for me to get them. Thank you. Finish, please.
They've made servicing the debt and the deficit the third largest spending priority of their government. That puts our future generations at risk. I said that last week. It takes money intended for health care and education and gives it toward paying off the debt. You don't have to take my word for it. Even the Toronto Star said this past week, quote, "The Liberal plan leaves Ontario's poorest children behind." Not only is this budget a fiscal train wreck, it makes life more difficult for everyday families.
Associate Minister of Finance.
And for middle-class families, it's just as bad. They are taking money, namely for the children's activity tax credit that helps mums and dads give their kids a hands up. So I would like to know why this government is trying to take that away and making it a bigger burden for mothers and fathers.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, as usual, it's difficult because there's no consistency coming from the opposition. So I'm not quite sure whether they think we should be spending more, whether we should be spending less. We've got a credible plan, Mr. Speaker, to eliminate the deficit. But at the same time, we know that investing in people is important, and that's why the free tuition, the changes to student assistance, Mr. Speaker, are so very important for families across the province, particularly low-income and middle-income families, Mr. Speaker. We've been very clear in terms of changes on the tax credits. We were going to look at every line in our spending, Mr. Speaker. Yeah. We were going to make decisions based on the evidence. So if you look at the children's activity tax credit, it was not serving its intended purpose. Its intended purpose was to assist lower-income families with enrollment costs. That's not what it was doing, Mr. Speaker. So we changed that, and we're going to continue to make those kinds of decisions that reinvest and deliver the outcomes that we know people need.
Thank you. Supplementary.
If the Premier wants to talk about consistency, she has to look at the last 9 budgets her government tabled and see a massive deficit and an even bigger debt that has made Ontario a basket case financially. The children's activity tax credit is useful to a lot of mothers and fathers I represent in Riverside South and in Barrhaven. They apply it to their children's piano lessons, to hockey fees, even to help them tutor as their children progress, sometimes making an otherwise unaffordable activity accessible to that family. Even Dalton McGuinty, when he brought in the single largest sales tax increase in Ontario's history, the HST brought in the tax credit and said, quote, "It is one more way we can help parents pay for those costs associated with raising healthy, active kids." And now you're going to cut it when you bring in the single largest gas tax increase in Ontario's history. What have you got against the next generation?
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I want the next generation to be at its very best. That's why we are making dramatic changes to student assistance in this province, Mr. Speaker. But, you know, the member opposite doesn't get to say spend more and spend less at the same time. You just don't get to have it both.
Premier.
Promised the people of Ontario that we were going to go through all of the expenditures in government, and we were going to look at what was working and what wasn't. So if you look, for example, at the health homes renovation tax credit, what has happened is that credit has had significantly lower take-up than we had anticipated, Mr. Speaker, and doesn't provide support to low-income seniors. That's what it was intended to do, Mr. Speaker. That's not what it does, so we're not going to continue with that. The research and development tax credit, we're actually reinvesting the savings from those tax changes into new targeted investments. So, Mr. Speaker, we've made decisions based on evidence so that we can get the outcomes that we know are needed, whether it's for seniors or low-income families who need support for